We mentioned earlier leafy lettuces and brassicas,
Yes.
and those enjoy the cool weather, maybe a slight freeze as well. How do you protect raised beds or perennials from early frost or freeze damage?
Great question. Typically, what I'll do is I'll set up like a wire or PVC pipe, almost like a little arch. Looks like a little mini hoop house, right? And the goal there is to just establish a frame that I can put a frost cloth over. Now, there's many different types of frost cloths. People use different ones that are different sizes, colors, thickness, whatever. I use one in particular from Gardener Supply, which is one of my favorites. But for the more sensitive plants, especially if you're concerned about frost early in the fall, where you might have some pretty early stage seedlings that are more sensitive to it, that's the time to really have it. But making sure that infrastructure is up there is important because you don't want to be caught off guard and realize, oh, shoot, I've got 8 beds that I have to protect and it's going to frost tomorrow and I don't have anything set up yet. So I usually recommend once you've planted those things in the fall and moved off of your summer crop, that's the best time to just get that PVC pipe in there, get it established, just so that when you need to, all you need to do is put on the cloth and you're good to go.
Welcome to the Mother Earth News and Friends podcast. At Mother Earth News for 50 years and counting, we've been dedicated to conserving the planet's natural resources while helping you conserve your financial resources. In this podcast, we host conversations with experts in the fields of sustainability, homesteading, natural health, and more to share all about how you can live well wherever you are in a way that values both people and our Mother Earth.
Good day, everyone. I am Kenny Coogan, and joining me on this episode of Mother Earth News and Friends is Nick Cutsumpas, also known as Farmer Nick. Nick is a professional plant coach, urban gardener, and sustainability advocate, known for transforming both homes and hearts through the power of plants. Nick has been featured in the New York Times, Vogue, Architectural Digest, Business Insider, and Washington Post. He has been seen on the TEDx stage, on the Netflix original series The Big Flower Fight, and as host on Netflix's Emmy-winning Instant Dream Home. Today, we're digging into the seasonal side of sustainable living, specifically how fall gardening and winter preparation can set you up for a thriving, low-impact growing season. From pruning perennials to mulching with intention, Nick's got the practical wisdom and plant positive vibes to help us close the season strong and start the next one even better. Welcome to the podcast, Nick.
Thank you so much for having me.
I just moved from Florida to North Carolina, so this will be the first time in 12 years that I experience the fall season.
And maybe a little snow, depending on where you're at.
You've inspired so many people to connect with plants in intentional, sustainable ways. And as we transition from summer into fall, what does this season mean to you as a gardener and educator?
Fall is the time of slowing down. And just because we're slowing down doesn't mean that there's not things to do, because there are plenty of things to do. But for me, it's about setting the garden up for that final harvest at the end of the season, getting my winter squashes and other things harvested in time for Thanksgiving. Pumpkins, of course, are a big hit around October, November as well. But it's just an exercise in patience and being able to really wrap up the last of the beautiful season and the harvest while still setting up your garden for success throughout the course of the winter and then eventually the spring.
You've often said that plants are great teachers. What are they teaching us in autumn that we might be overlooking?
The fall represents growth that is not seen. And what I mean by that is fall is the best time to plant your perennials, your trees, all those things. We really get sucked into spring because we're over the winter weather, right? We want to be outside. But fall is the best because it allows root development. Now, we can't see that. We will never be able to see all of the growth that our plants go through in the fall. However, it's best for the plants because it allows them to grow without any pressure, no pressure to bloom, no pressure to fruit, no pressure of the heat. It's a great time to get your plants in the ground, and sometimes growth is not always seen, but it's still happening beneath the surface.
Many folks think of fall as the end of gardening season. How do you keep the rhythm going this time of year?
So for me and a lot of my clients through my landscaping business, it's about education around best time to plant. As we talked about just before, fall is the best time because there's less stressful factors that are happening that are going to cause potential damage to those plants. I try and get as many perennials in the ground as possible. I like planting trees in the fall. I'll be doing an orchard this fall on my own property here in Michigan. And it's just a really good time because it's wet, it's cooler temperatures, it's not freezing cold yet. And it's a beautiful time to be out in the garden, a little crisp nip in the air and never hurt anybody. And honestly, I enjoy it more because I'd rather be out in the garden when it's 50 degrees than when it's 85 degrees. So it's also nice for me to get out there and not have to worry so much about the weather.
Earlier this year in May, I ordered two cherry trees, bare roots. They
Mm,
were 5 feet tall. They came with all their leaves. And within the day of me planting them, they defoliated. But I've been watering them every day, and I occasionally will scrape the bark, and everybody's still green, and
good.
they're
Scraping
starting
the
to put
bark
their
is a
buds
good
out.
tip. Yes,
Yeah.
make sure it's alive, right? But yeah, it's a great time to do it. Bare root is also a very cost-effective way to do it. So if I'm going to get 40 some odd trees in this orchard this fall, probably going to do it bare root for a good portion of them.
What are some of your favorite low maintenance or productive crops for fall gardens?
Oh, it's got to be leafy greens. Leafy greens are one of those crops that are quick to germinate after direct sow. You can plant them virtually any time of year. I think that they are best planted in early spring and in late summer into the fall, just because it's about 30, 45 days or so until you can get a full harvest. But even if you don't reach full harvest, let's say it gets really cold in your area, some of them can be harvested really well as baby plants, baby spinach, tender kale, right? The earlier it is, the more tender it tends to be. And some of these leafy greens that are even frost resistant turn out tasting better because when the frost occurs, their carbohydrates intensify. It almost acts like antifreeze for the plant. So I always say that your leafy greens will taste even better in the fall than they did in the spring or summer.
Yeah, just maybe 6 weeks ago, I sowed in my basement with grow lights purple Brussels sprouts, artichokes,
Oh, nice.
some bok choy, but I'm excited to overwinter the artichokes and get
Cool.
those frosts on those Brussels sprouts to get them tasting really good.
When are you going to plant those?
I did it 6 to 8 weeks before the end of August, which is when this
Okay.
podcast comes out, because that is what the local extension office told me to do.
There you go. Very nice.
So in the middle of North Carolina, which is where I am, Winston-Salem area, our first frost date is the end of October. So that gives the plants about 60 days to grow and establish.
Great. That's awesome.
Do you have a typical September through November checklist or calendar that guides your fall garden workflow?
It's a great question. I would hesitate to say calendar specifically because each year is a little different, chronologically speaking, right? The time I do certain things is very much weather dependent and temperature dependent. But in general, the first thing I'll do is I'll just check out my soil, see how it's feeling, do the finger test just to assess, okay, what amendments might be needed. I will typically also, this is moving into October or so, will start grabbing leaves and collecting those and putting those over as mulch. I never want to leave the soil bare. That is number one no no in any kind of permaculture or organic gardening, even raised bed gardening. I want to make sure that that soil is covered just to maintain all of the beneficials that are there, prevent any erosion. I don't want to stress out that soil. So giving it a nice top dressing of leaves from the yard, which there are usually plenty. I hate seeing people bring out their leaves on the side of the road because there's so much good stuff in there. Even if you just left the leaves in a big pile, you don't even have to turn it into compost. It's great for the pollinators and other insect species that overwinter in that leaf litter. So I'll typically do that around October. And then if I want to, if I've got any extra compost that I don't want to have freeze over the winter, because I don't continue the composting much over the winter because it gets really cold out here and I get a little bit lazy in that regard. But I'll add a little bit of compost, mix that in, hit it with some leaf litter, and then I'm ready to go. One thing I won't do particularly is I won't prune back my perennials or cut them back to the base until spring. The reason I do that is also because there's other insect species that will overwinter in those perennials, and also some of them will have seeds that will provide food for the birds in the wintertime as well. So I'm not a big fan of cutting everything back in the fall. I'll typically wait until early spring before I make those cuts. And then the only thing I'll really prune back would be any fruit trees in the fall. And that can be an into November project for sure before it gets too cold. But making sure I'm using good sharp shears, it's not freezing out, and make the cuts I need to increase airflow, top them off at a certain height, especially for the fruit trees, which I don't want to get over 8 feet tall or so.
At a local community garden, they had a field of poppies, and there was a huge flock of yellow finches just devouring all the seeds.
That's the way to do it. And if we cut things early, those birds won't have the same level of food source that they would otherwise. So it's a great thing to do and good for anyone who loves birds, which most gardeners do.
And because of that, I purchased a packet of poppy seeds immediately.
There you go.
Now, locally on Facebook Marketplace, somebody was giving away a barn full of hay bales.
Whoa.
But the caveat was that the hay has been sitting there for 2 decades.
Wow. That's a long time.
So I don't know if there's mold problems, but I was thinking it would still be good for maybe mulch, but maybe compost.
Yeah. Obviously, it's been there a long time. If it's been there that long, I would assume there's got to be some mold somewhere in that, but it's always good to have straw mulch. I use straw mulch on my garden beds. It's great for keeping that water retention going.
You mentioned tucking in your garden. What rituals or physical tasks help signal that seasonal shift for you?
Oh, collecting the leaves. It's a never-ending process here. I moved in to this new house, which is 10 acres or so, and it's very wooded. And we moved in fall. And I was just here for the color. It looked amazing. And then a month later, I was dealing with more leaves than I've ever seen in my entire life. So getting out the leaf blower, the rake, the tarps is a big part of it. I know there's different attachments you can use on ride-on mowers that help collect the leaves as well. But in general, I think the leaves are just so symbolic of that change and can be so useful in the garden. You can grind them up for compost. You can leave the leaves for the pollinators. You can top dress the beds like I do every year. It's such a great free resource that we don't often take advantage of. And even just blowing them off into other areas of your yard that you won't see is totally good. So I have no problem with it, but I know a lot of people get very picky around how their yard looks, which is good and bad, right? But I'm a big leave the leaves proponent. And I think that in general, anything that relates to the changing of the seasons in regards to the trees is very symbolic for me.
We mentioned earlier like leafy lettuces and brassicas,
Yes.
and those enjoy the cool weather, maybe a slight freeze as well. How do you protect raised beds or perennials from early frost or freeze damage?
Great question. Typically, what I'll do is I'll set up like a wire or PVC pipe, almost like a little arch. Looks like a little mini hoop house, right? And the goal there is to just establish a frame that I can put a frost cloth over. Now, there's many different types of frost cloths. People use different ones that are different sizes, colors, thickness, whatever. I use one in particular from Gardener Supply, which is one of my favorites. But for the more sensitive plants, especially if you're concerned about frost early in the fall, where you might have some pretty early stage seedlings that are more sensitive to it, that's the time to really have it. But making sure that infrastructure is up there is important because you don't want to be caught off guard and realize, oh, shoot, I've got 8 beds that I have to protect and it's going to frost tomorrow and I don't have anything set up yet. So I usually recommend once you've planted those things in the fall and moved off of your summer crop, that's the best time to just get that PVC pipe in there, get it established, just so that when you need to, all you need to do is put on the cloth and you're good to go.
When it comes to feeding the soil, do you like cover crops or mulch or a combination of those?
Definitely a combination. Mulch for sure. I'm a big mulcher. Mulching is important. And I think that it depends, the type of mulch you use depends on what you're growing, right? For any raised bed vegetable stuff, I'm going with straw mulch just because it's much thinner and it's not going to last a long time in there. I would never mulch my raised beds with something like cedar mulch, which is naturally rot resistant, going to last a few seasons at least. That I would use mainly for my perennial beds. So I just planted a giant bed of native pollinators around my garden, and that is all cedar mulch. And then the garden itself is all straw mulch. So that's typically what I'll do there. But in general, for the soil, I'm not really adding too much compost to it at this stage, right? Unless I'm doing a significant fall crop and I've got some leftover soil from the summer season. But I just want to I'm constantly checking my soil and moving to a new property, right? You never know what kind of soil you're going to get. We've got a lot of clay here in our yard in particular. Yeah, it's backbreaking work, but just digging up a little bit the first time and amending it so I can get a cover crop in there that can overwinter is always a good practice, especially if you're going to be doing planting directly in the ground in rows.
Let's talk plant performance reviews. How do you evaluate what worked and what didn't as you plan for winter and spring? I have a circular driveway, and inside it, it's maybe 1,000 square feet. Inside it, I planted a wildflower meadow.
Beautiful.
Half of it's beautiful wildflowers, and then the other half was retaken by non-native grass.
Yeah, it's always a never-ending battle against the invasives. And I think it's one of those things where if you care about the ecology and you're trying to have pollinators and whatnot, you can't really spray too much when it comes to glyphosate and some of these other things that I do not use. I could understand if you had 100 acres and you're trying to get rid of invasives and you're not worried about foot traffic or animals, dogs, this and that. I get it. And doing that for the first time, I've seen people do that even in conservation groups. But for the home gardener and someone who's going to be trafficking that area a lot, especially with pets or anything like that, I think just removing by hand and even hitting with a bit of vinegar, Epsom salt, dish soap combination, just to try to get some of it back there is always a good practice. Hand pulling will take you forever. But the more lawn that we can get rid of, the better. And it seems like you've got a fun little spot there that's probably going to take you a lot of time if it's 1,000 square feet.
We're going to take a quick break to hear a word from our sponsor. And when we return, we'll be talking about sustainability. We are back with professional plant coach and urban gardener Nick Cutsumpas. He is also the author of Plant Coach, the Beginner's Guide to Caring for Plants. Nick, you are big on sustainability, and I have a master's degree in sustainability.
Love it.
Fall garden mistakes or habits do you see that unintentionally create waste?
Oh, okay. Any gardener knows, any plant person knows that nursery pots are just everywhere. They're the bane of my existence. They're very difficult to recycle, partially because I think most of them are like number 5 recycling label, but because they're dirty, and most people aren't cleaning them up or bringing them to a professional recycling facility that can handle those things, it can be very challenging. That said, one practice that I've gotten in a good habit of is that if I'm going to buy any new plants, which of course we're going to be buying seedlings at some point and different trees and whatnot, I try to save as many of those nursery pots as possible. Now, if there's the flimsy 6 cell tray ones that are those thin plastic that break all the time, those you can get rid of. Those are not going to help anybody out. But if you got a decent, thick nursery pot, be it a 4 inch, 6 inch, whatever, even some of those seed trays can get a little bit bigger now, save them. Start your seeds in them. It's a great practice to do over the winter, like you said, with your grow light setup. I've got my greenhouse here, which is an absolute luxury in terms of extending my season. I'm going to keep that at about, I'd say, 55 degrees or so over the course of the winter. And I'm going to grow as many things as I can in those nursery pots. So being able to reuse, repurpose those in any way you can is always a good practice because they're very difficult to recycle properly.
I'm still recovering from a visit to my friend's house that happened 10 years ago. They had a beautiful vegetable garden, and we were cooking in their kitchen, and then all of their food scraps were going into the garbage.
Oh, oh, composting. Gotta do it. Gotta do it. It's in the wintertime, we use our loamy, which I know is not true compost, right? But it's a great way to just take the food scraps and not throw them in the landfill because people don't realize that a head of lettuce can last 20 plus years in a landfill because it doesn't have the right environment to decompose properly, all the while releasing methane and other gases that are very negative for our environment. So food waste is a huge part of that. And also when you're shutting down your garden for the year and cutting out those tomato plants in the fall, those can be composted too, right? This, even if you just throw them in the yard or bury them somewhere, anything but throwing them in the trash and getting them picked up by the local trash garbage company is a win.
So today we're talking about gardening in the fall, preparing for the winter. And I'm not going to allow you to answer this next question with saying perusing the seed catalogs, because that is a December, January activity.
Yes.
So what can people do to use this quiet season of, let's say, September through November to reflect, plan, or reimagine their garden purpose?
So one thing that, especially with this new property that I want to do is create a proper photo journal of the season. The reason I say that is because, you know, there's going to come a time next spring where you're going to be like, all right, I want to rotate the crops in my beds because I don't want them pulling the same nutrients. Always good to have crop rotations no matter what kind of food you're growing or anything. And you're going to think about, was the tomato bed here or was it on this one or this? I can't remember. Were the brassicas here? Having photo evidence of all of it, which most gardeners take their pictures. It's so easy nowadays with their smartphones, but just organizing it, right? Take all the photos, drop them in an album and say, hey, this is my spring, summer, fall garden 2025. That way you have something to reference back next year. It's something that I've done with my clients when they have questions. It's something my mom does with her harvest. She doesn't weigh her harvest, but she's able to see, oh, look, last year at this time, I picked 100 cherry tomatoes in this picture. This year I only had 50. I wonder what's going on. It allows you to establish a baseline so you can start making adjustments and seeing what works, what doesn't, and what might increase your yields down the line.
Yeah, that's a very good point. A couple of years ago, I interviewed Joe Lample, and he also mentioned that everyone has a camera in their pocket.
Yeah.
And although we don't need to be sharing it through social media, it's good evidence.
Good practice.
Yeah.
Joe's the best. Joe was one of my gardening role models when I first got started. He's fantastic.
Now, you yourself have reached a huge audience through your many shows. How has that experience influenced your garden philosophy?
Oh, I think it's honestly influenced it negatively because I'm used to having a team of 50 on hand or endless plants at my disposal that I can use and get done in the ground real fast. I think if anything, it's taught me the value in slowing down, in not needing to get everything done all at once. Times where I'm struggling, like, hey, I forgot to go get this. I need to do this. And I can't turn and ask somebody, hey, I need this plant in 30 minutes. See you then. So that can always be a little bit of a challenge. I think it's a more real world experience, right? It's me in my yard. My wife helps me out as well, but she has a full-time job. She can't dedicate the time to this, but the slowness allows me to do more self-reflection and also teach a little bit as well. I coach baseball here at the local high school this year, and a lot of the boys were asking, hey, Coach Nick, do you have summer job opportunities? We'd love to help out. And it's been great, right? I get 3, 4 guys come over. They learn about what I'm doing here on the homestead. They learn about mulching. They learn about native plants, growing food. And I wouldn't be able to do that level of teaching if it wasn't, if it wasn't a show concept, because you're moving so fast and it's all about the drama and what you're trying to accomplish in a short amount of time. The elongated time allows me to share my knowledge in a different way, get a little bit deeper than just that soundbite for TV, and share some of this with that next generation of future gardeners.
I run a carnivorous plant nursery, and I think I need some unpaid interns as well.
We pay them, but it's certainly the high school rates are better than the adult rates, that's for sure.
Do you have any surprising or funny behind the scenes you'd like to share from a
Oh yeah.
specific TV show?
Oh, from one of the TV shows. So a couple times, this was more so with Instant Dream Home, which we were renovating homes in a day. One of my biggest challenges was when you're doing the landscaping and you're also renovating the home at the same time. There's a lot of conflicting schedules and machines that are moving through and whatnot. And we're all trying to do this in a very short amount of time with 200 people on site. So accidents happen. So we were trying to get in, I think it was one of the southern magnolias, which are very common in Atlanta, a great plant. And we were bringing it in on a skid steer. It was like a 14-footer, pretty big already. Bringing it in on a skid steer, and there's people walking all around it. It's very complicated, right? And you've got this big giant tree in a burlap bag swinging around, could hit somebody. And someone walked in front of it. The skid steer driver tried to move, and the tree swung around and went right into someone's windshield. Fortunately, there was no damage. No one got injured or anything like that. But it was funny to see this big tree whipping around in the street there. It could have caused a problem, but fortunately, we got out of it okay. But when you're moving big trees with lots of machinery and a lot of people around, it can be a little tricky.
When you're creating content, especially in the fall and winter, how do you make plants exciting for a digital first audience? When I think of that question, I think about when I watch Instagram, I think of, oh, here's us putting 100 bulbs in the ground, but then they
Yeah,
always show 8 months later.
exactly. It's not exactly showy and colorful in these months here, but I would say that for me, I shift my focus a little bit and I lean heavily more into some of the indoor gardening, the house plants, hydroponics, things of that nature. And also will this year have the opportunity to show off my greenhouse and show things that I'm overwintering, show things that I am planting that will live in there full time, like my citrus trees that I could have out in LA, of course, but here in Michigan, certainly not possible. So I think it's going to unlock some new content opportunities for me, but also sharing about how I store food, how I cook the food, leaning more into some of the culinary aspects in the winter is always a good thing because people are starting to think about as we get into January, their New Year's resolutions, what kind of diets they're trying to do, this and that. So I always like to share fun plant-based recipes, specifically those that I've used crops from my garden.
Fall is the perfect time to be preserving the bounty.
Exactly.
Have you seen one plant trend online that makes you cringe or clap?
Cringe or clap? I would say clap in general. I've really seen a much stronger push towards natives and pollinators in these last 3 years. I'm sure you've seen it in your work as well, but it's really gotten into the gardening philosophy, regardless of who is doing the landscaping and gardening, right? There are companies that are big companies that are now starting to give more attention to it. And I think that certainly related to an increased focus on environmentalism, that's certainly a clap. A cringe will still be related to lawns. It's not necessarily the grass lawns, it's the artificial turf lawns. I saw it so much in California, and people are like, oh, it's better than grass. We're not watering it. I'm like, yes, but you've created increased heat. It's doing nothing for the soil. It's made of plastic. Who knows what kind of chemicals are being released with all that heat on the plastic in those temperatures. I'm just not a fan of it. I think there's so many beautiful native plants that can be used in those more drought climates, but I don't know. I can't get behind the fake grass. I can't do it.
At a very far distance, it looks nice, but then when you get close, it looks really bad.
And half the time, weeds popping up out of it anyway. So I think it's a waste of money and not a good environmental solution.
Okay, let's leave the listeners with a call to action. For somebody starting their first fall garden, what's one simple high impact action that they can take today?
If you're starting your fall garden, it's the best time to do it. Go to your local nurseries and ask them, hey, which trees do you not want to overwinter? Because you will get so many trees and perennials and shrubs 50 to 75% off, because the nursery doesn't want to have to dig a hole and bury them and make sure that they're surviving over the winter. They want to get rid of as much as they possibly can, and it's going to be the most cost-effective time for you to do your gardening. Now, are those plants going to look good? Absolutely not. It's going to look like you're planting a bunch of sticks. Forgetting the perennials, they're usually cut off at that point. It looks like you're just planting nothing. But I'm telling you, you will save so much money. It's great for the plants, great for your wallet, and it's the best way to get started with low risk in terms of your investment.
Thank you so much, Nick, for digging into fall gardening with us today.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Mother Earth News and Friends. To listen to more podcasts and get connected on our social media, visit www.motherearthnews.com/podcast. You can also email us at podcast@ogdenpubs.com with any questions or suggestions. Our podcast production team includes Kenny Coogan, Alyssa Warner, and myself, Josh Wilder. Music for this episode is the song Hustle by Kevin MacLeod. The Mother Earth News and Friends podcast is a production of Ogden Publications.